What you need in the building? How's everybody doing? So I'm gonna get right into it. We're talking about today taking risks, taking chances. Something that a lot of people in boxing today are not willing to do, but there actually comes perks and rewards to doing so. Particularly the more obscure a fighter is, the more prevalent and well-known a fighter is. Taking those risks also comes with great rewards. Sometimes it has to do with timing. That is true, but still it comes with great rewards. So we're going to talk about that in this stream right now. Okay. First and foremost, let me get to it. I am what you need. You're watching my channel. If you like what you're seeing, you can like, subscribe, share. You can also donate. The donation link is in the chat section. It's also in the description, so you can check that out and you can donate. Donations always appreciated. If you want to join on this stream as a guest right now, we're using StreamYard, so you can hop on here as well as a guest, and we can start chopping it up. All right. Also, you can leave your comments in the chat section. Any which way how you want to do it is fine by me. Let's get into it. So, what we find is that a lot of boxers today, are very hesitant to face guys who are the very best, who they think their styles are very difficult. Like, take for instance, Jerome Boots Ennis. Stephen Espinoza spoke about how a lot of his opponents, they have to actually be paid much more than they would normally be paid to face him. Okay, because a lot of them, of course, feel that they would lose. And if you're an opponent that's mostly in obscurity, you're mostly in obscurity. There are pluses to facing someone who's an A side and who's somebody who's sort of billing their, you could see in the future becoming a future Hall of Famer or somebody who is going to really do good things, great things in boxing, because your name's going to be attached to that. That's the first thing. The other thing is, depending on your performance, you come out of obscurity. All right, and I'm going to give you several examples of such fighters in my in the stream today. In fact, let me just go straight into it. So, one of the fighters who have come out of obscurity, nobody knew about them. And actually, the guy was a reject. He got lost a lot of fights and stuff like that. Is Willie Monroe. Willie Monroe became famous after he faced Gennady Triple G Golovkin. If you guys do remember, all right. So I don't know if you guys remember. I don't know if you guys were old enough or you guys can remember that Willie Monroe faced this guy. All right. This is Triple G versus Willie Monroe. And at the time, boxers they weren't going the distance with Triple G. Triple G was stopping everybody. And Willie Monroe, I think he went 6 rounds with Triple G. And because of that, Willie Monroe came out of obscurity. He was in a tournament, which he won, I believe, for boxers outside of mainstream boxing. He couldn't get the opportunities he needed to. Willie Monroe went up one weight class because he fought at 154. He went up to 160, and he had the opportunity to face Triple G. This is after Aristotle Lara called out Triple G to face him. This guy, who's like a pseudo, supposedly Cuban style of boxing, Willie Monroe came in, and he was like the Aristotle Lara version. It's a very cheap version of Aristotle Lara, who was going to face Triple G. He was also southpaw, like Aristotle Lara. He went on to fight Triple G, and from there he got a name. He was able to go, I think, 6 rounds with Triple G. Triple G eventually stopped him. He fought, and he fought quite valiantly to the best of his ability. And because of that, Willie Monroe is now a name in boxing. Not a big, big name, but he's a bigger name than he used to be. And he was a struggling boxer. And because of that, he got other big fights. And so that you guys would see what other big fights he got, I'm going to go through his resume. He ended up staying at 160, by the way. So after the Triple G fight, before the Triple G fight, Willie Monroe had zero opportunities of facing elite fighters. Okay, zero opportunities. Okay, Willie Monroe fought the following people. He fought nobodies, and then he lost a split decision to Darnell Boone. And he disappeared into obscurity until there was this competition that happened where he won the NBA, NABA, and vacant WBO, NABO middleweight titles against another very good fighter, Brandon Adams, in a competition that was just specially designed for these athletes who would probably never have gotten a title shot, never get a title shot in their careers. And this was a specially designed competition. He went on to beat Brian Vera, who was a guy that fought, of course, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., gave him 2 really great fights. I think, did he beat him once? I don't know if he beat him once. And from there, because of that platform, he got this shot, this opportunity through Gennady Golovkin's at the time, Tom Loeffler Promotions. He was able to face Triple G off of that. So a guy who probably never would have gotten this opportunity to face Triple G, but because he entered this tournament and won it, he had the opportunity to face Triple G after Erislandy Lara repeatedly had called out Triple G to face him. And this was at middleweight. He also won a middleweight title in that special competition, but he really is, at the time, he really was a 154-pounder. Okay? So he went on to face for the WBA super title, the middleweight title, the IBO title, and interim WBC middleweight titles. This is what Triple G had at the time. He fought him in Inglewood, California, and he lost, of course. The fight did go 6 rounds, like I said. But the point is, after that, okay, he hadn't faced anybody except for Darnell Boone, who was not an elite fighter. He got fights with Gabe Rosado. Then he got another championship fight for the WBO title against Billy Joe Saunders, who was another world champion. All right. And then he went on to face and have a couple other fights against a top contender, Hugo Centeno Jr. He fought him. So my point being, Willie Monroe, if he hadn't jumped at that challenge to face Triple G, he would not have been in a position to have another title fight. This is a guy who went from no chance of getting a title fight, none, to getting a title fight, and then getting a subsequent title fight, facing the best in the 160-pound division, even though it's a 154-pounder. So what I'm trying to say is, if he didn't take that risk and go against Triple G, which everybody else didn't want to face Triple G at the time, he would not have reaped a reward. Now, not only did his paycheck quadruple from whatever he had before, but he had an opportunity to get another big fight, and he got a big fight with Billy Joe Saunders, and he made another big paycheck. Okay, so that's Willie Monroe. Let's go to another one. I have many, and you can actually, if you want to, you can also put some others in the chat, or you can jump on here, as I said before, as a guest, and join me, and let's chop it up on this topic. Another fighter that came out of obscurity, he was well known in Mexico, but he was not known to the world, is Isaac Cruz. Isaac Cruz. And Isaac Cruz became extremely famous, and all of a sudden he became a top 10 lightweight in the lightweight division. Right now, Isaac Cruz is going to be facing Rolly Romero for the WBA Super Lightweight Championship of the World. Isaac Cruz became famous. In fact, so famous that Isaac Cruz is considered, he faced what is considered one of the greatest lightweights right now in the lightweight division, Gervonta Tank Davis, aka Abdul Wahid. All right. If Isaac Cruz didn't take that risk and take on Abdul Wahid, and I wanted to show you who Isaac Cruz was facing before Abdul Wahid, and who he's facing now after Abdul Wahid. Okay, because that's an important point. It's about being great, and being great allows you to make that paycheck, allows your stock to rise. It's a risk. But what are the rewards? What are the upsides to these things, these risks? Okay. So Isaac Cruz, by facing Gervonta Tank Davis, right? By facing Gervonta, even though he lost, by facing Gervonta Tank Davis, Isaac Cruz rankings went way up in all the other ranking boards. His paycheck went way up after that fight. Okay, because he had it. This was his first championship fight. He was undefeated, of course. Before that fight, he had faced Francisco Vargas and Diego Magdaleno. Francisco Vargas was a super featherweight world champion, and Diego Magdaleno, he was a top contender at super featherweight and lightweight. Okay, but Diego Magdaleno had long since decayed. Had been beaten by Teofimo Lopez, a bunch of people. Right, so he wasn't a top tier guy. And Francisco Vargas just moved to lightweight. He was once a top tier champion, but he had since faded a while ago, and he destroyed Francisco Vargas. So he went up against Gervonta Tank Davis. After that fight, he got himself a second championship fight against now Rolando Romero at super lightweight. Now, no one knew about Pitbull Cruz except for probably some of the Mexican people, but the world now knows about Pitbull Cruz. Pitbull Cruz is one of the superstars of the lightweight division and possibly the super lightweight division. He'll become, if he becomes world champion, he has an opportunity at this point in time to become WBA champion because of his fight with Gervonta Tank Davis. Had he not fought Gervonta Tank Davis, we wouldn't be talking about Pitbull Cruz as we do today. We wouldn't know who he was. Okay? So for all the fighters out there, especially the ones in obscurity, all right, who the boxing world might know, but the casual fans don't. Now, casual fans know who Pitbull Cruz is. Okay? And it's always an upside when you face the very best. It's always an upside to it. Whether you get destroyed, whether you put up a great fight. Of course, if you put up a great fight, your name goes into continuity, or shall I say, posterity. Okay, if you put up a great fight, particularly if people think you won, as some people thought Pitbull Cruz won against Tank Davis. Not only is Pitbull Cruz esteemed highly by fans, but Pitbull Cruz is also making more money. He came out of extreme poverty to having this opportunity to make millions of dollars in the future. I don't know if his fight with Rolly Romero he'll make any millions, but definitely if he beats Rolly Romero, he'll be in line to get $1 million paychecks. $1 million paychecks. Risk versus reward. Risk versus reward. Let me give you another example. For those of you who might have forgotten him, I have not. Brian Castano. Brian Castano. Nobody knew who Brian Castano was. He's a Argentinian boxer. Nobody knew who he was until he faced and fought convincingly, and some people think did do the job, on Erislandy Lara. Okay, Brian Castano jumped at the opportunity to face Erislandy Lara. Now, he had Olympic pedigree. He had a lot of things, Brian Castano. But people didn't know who he was until he fought Erislandy Lara. And we saw what he did with Erislandy Lara. One can argue he beat Erislandy Lara. Right? And after the Erislandy Lara fight, 1 second. Let's show you who he fought and who he beat. I don't think he was a world champion before Erislandy Lara. Okay, he had fought different people. He had an interim title. The regular title. Yeah, he fought Erislandy Lara to a draw. Now, honestly speaking, I thought he beat Erislandy Lara. After that, he fought. He won the WBO light middleweight title or super middleweight title against Patrick Teixeira. So he got a chance at the championship against Brian Teixeira, who was an up-and-coming top-ranked fighter who had become world champion just recently. And then he fought Jermell Charlo, the guy, who had most of the belts. Jermell Charlo to a split decision draw for all the belts, for undisputed. All right. And he rematched Jermell Charlo, and he lost to Jermell Charlo. Jermell Charlo stopping him late in the 10th round in a somewhat competitive fight. And he lost his WBO title. But the thing about it is, he went from obscurity. Nobody really knew who Brian Castano was to now people know who Brian Castano is. Even though he lost to Jermell Charlo in the second fight, in the rematch. And he's forever tied to Jermell Charlo's name. He can tell you what it's like to fight Jermell Charlo, etc., etc. Not only is he a part of history, but he's gotten a bigger paycheck. And whenever he fights again, if he does ever fight again, he'll get a bigger paycheck. Because now he has fought 2 world champions or former world champions. And so it never hurts. And it was a very exciting fight, by the way. Both were very exciting fights. So it never hurts. So people will always be interested in a Brian Castano fight because they know it's nonstop action. They know he brings it. He's entertaining. And he came out of obscurity. It pays to face the best possible fighter in your division or the best possible fighter in the sanctioning body or the very best or somebody better than you or deemed better than you to fight upwards, not to duck or dodge any fight, but particularly facing the very best. Let's keep it moving. I got more examples, and you guys can bring up your own examples. This one is a very famous one, and it's interesting because this fight actually happened almost at the end of the fighter's career. Carson Jones versus Kell Brook. At the time, Kell Brook was on the rise. I don't think he was world champion yet, and he wasn't world champion. He was just one of those prospects who was considered a great prospect at the time, and he faced a fighter named Carson Jones. Carson Jones had fought guys like Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. He always put on a great fight. Okay, I want to show you something here. So let me go to Carson Jones. Now, Carson Jones was no stranger. Yes, here he is. He's no stranger to exciting fights. But the world at that point in time probably forgot about it. Okay? Carson Jones had faced a number of different opponents during his career. He faced Jesus Soto Karass and lost to him. But he had faced no one of the caliber of a Kell Brook. Okay? He faced Alfonso Gomez. He'd faced, let me see what this is. He'd faced Alfonso Gomez, but nobody really except for Jesus Soto Karass. I thought it was Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. No, it's Jesus Soto Karass. So nobody of Kell Brook's kind of ilk he had ever faced in his career, but he had a lot of fights, and he was down to the end of his career when he faced Kell Brook, and it went to a 12-round decision where Kell Brook actually won the fight, even though Carlson Jones had hurt Kell Brook several times. Okay, not only did he face Kell Brook again and rematched him, but he then also got fights against. He also got fights against Antonio Margarito and Brian Rose, who was at the time a world champion across in England. Now, the thing with Carlson Jones was he was an exciting fighter, one, and two, he fought his butt off in every single fight. Wasn't the most talented, most skilled fighter out there, but he was. And because of that, Carlson Jones, who had been seen on HBO and stuff before, but people forgot about him, and they thought Kell Brook was going to wash him. He put up such an exceptional fight against Kell Brook. Kell Brook faced him again, and Carlson Jones was able to make another paycheck off of that. Not only that, but he also got to face Antonio Margarito, was the last fight of his career, and he made some more money off of that. So what I'm saying is that there's always the upside. And plus, remember, because this fighter is tied to a great champion, for interviews, and sometimes like a great company like HBO, Showtime, or Amazon Prime, or whoever comes to interview concerning another fighter, they're probably going to pay you for the interview to find out more about the fighter, blah, 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 blah. So there's always going to be some sort of upside to you being tied to the legacy of a great. You understand? And he's tied to the legacy of two greats, Antonio Margarito and Kell Brook. And how does that benefit you? Because not only are people, when they're interested in talking about Antonio Margarito or Kell Brook, and talking about you, particularly Antonio Margarito at the time when he faced Carlson Jones, I'm guessing he had loaded gloves. No, this was later, actually, when they were much older. But Antonio Margarito, to say that your legacy is tied to that is one thing. Another thing is the commercial aspect, the value of you over time, how your stock might go up or whatever because of that. So there is always the financial incentive to face the very best. And a lot of times, win, lose, or draw. And this is something that Ryan Garcia understands as he ties himself to Tank, and now he's tying himself to Devin Haney. If he can, he could tie himself to Shakur if Shakur goes up to 140 probably. But the point is, whether Ryan Garcia wins the fight with Devin Haney, which is unlikely that he will win, but, Derek James is trying to put him in a position where he can be winning and be a much more complete fighter. But whether he wins or loses, Ryan Garcia would tie himself to the very best of the division, would make a ton of money because they're going to make money off of this, regardless of what anybody says. They're going to make money off of this. And not only that, Ryan Garcia understands that a legacy of a fighter is built, and the finances of a fighter is built on facing the fighters that a lot of people esteem very highly. He's got it. And once you put up a good fight, an exciting fight, you get another fight. I'll give you another example of another fighter out there who never became world champion, by the way, but raked in good money and has done well and been an underdog for the greatest challenge of his life. He was been the B-side. And this guy I'm talking about is Gabe Rosado. And Gabe Rosado has been in different things. He's been in different forms of boxing. He's been in big knockout boxing, BKB. He's been in professional boxing. But the thing about Gabe Rosado is this. Gabe Rosado came to prominence. He came to prominence. His big break was the Triple G fight. Gabe Rosado's big break was the Triple G fight. He went up a weight class. So he'd been fighting, at the time he had 27 fights. He fought guys like Jesus Soto Karass. He actually beat Jesus Soto Karass. He fought Alfredo Angulo. He got knocked out with Alfredo Angulo. He fought Kasim Uma, who would later give Triple G a run for his money. He actually got a split decision win over him. But these guys weren't big names. They weren't the big bucks. And then he fought Triple G. and he put up a hell of a fight. And the reason the fight stopped was because of his eye, and because of that, he went 7 rounds with Triple G. Gabe Rosado's name really cemented that. Until then, he was just a boxer, seen as, like a journeyman. And say what you want. You can say he was a journeyman. You can say he wasn't a journeyman. It doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, Gabe Rosado made the big money. He kept on. After the Triple G fight, he really started getting the fights. He got a fight with Jay Leon Love, where it was seen as a split decision. I don't know if it was a win or loss, but then they made it a no contest. He fought against Peter Quillen, where Peter Quillen stopped him in 10 rounds, but he put on a spirited performance. So he got the Jamel Charlo fight. He fought Jamel Charlo for unanimous decision in 10 rounds. Then he fought David Lemieux, and he got stopped in the 10th, I think it was because of cuts again, of a 12-rounder. He took on Joshua Clottey. He beat Joshua Clottey. All of these are names in boxing. He fought Willie Monroe. He lost to him. He fought Martin Murray. These were the top 160 pounders. Okay. He went on to face Luis Arias, Maciej Sulecki, who he almost stopped in the final round. He lost, but he could easily have stopped him. And then he ended up facing Danny Jacobs. Okay. He also fought Jaime Munguia very recently in 2021, Shane Mosley Jr. So because he fought so well, he actually got, how many championship fights did he have? He fought for the WBO championship against Peter Quillen at middleweight. He fought Gennady Golovkin for the WBA IBO middleweight titles. Okay. So he had 2 championship opportunities, became a contender twice. Because of the Gennady Golovkin fight, he was able to have another championship fight against Peter Quillen, who everybody wanted to see face Gennady Golovkin, and Danny Jacobs, destroyed Peter Quillen. My point being, Gabe Rosado has made a fair share of money in boxing, and I'm sure he invested it properly. And this guy never won a world championship. This guy was considered a glorified journeyman at a certain point and a gatekeeper at a certain point. But this man was able to fight some of the biggest fights in boxing because he jumped up to the challenge. He decided he was going to face the best whenever he got the opportunity. So he went from being considered a guy who was, okay, he's just average guy, to a guy who stepped up his game, improved his game, pushed the anvil, and became known as one of the biggest names in boxing. People interview him, all these kinds of things. Gabe, up to just recently there, a couple hours ago, was interviewed again about the sport of boxing, right? He's also commentating now in boxing. That job opened up for him. And this is a guy who never became a world champion. Think about what I'm saying. Always a crowd pleaser, always a fan favorite. I'm gonna bring up another one because I got names like crazy. This boxer, Otto Wallin. Otto Wallin came out of obscurity. Nobody knew who Otto Wallin is, just like many other boxers out there. Nobody knew who they are, right? Rolled the die, got the opportunity to face Tyson Fury. Not only did he bust up Tyson Fury's eye, but if Tyson Fury didn't put his weight down on him, Otto Wallin would have won that fight. Let's see what happened to his career, and let's see what happened to his finances. On taking that opportunity, Otto Wallin has had some other opportunities. Even though they were few and far between, he's had some other opportunities. Okay? Otto Wallin, after facing Tyson Fury and having a loss to Tyson Fury, he got to face some big nails in boxing, but more importantly, the biggest name he got to face several years later was Anthony Joshua. Now, Anthony Joshua destroyed him, but the point is that Otto Wallin was able to get that big opportunity and a big payday as a result of that big opportunity in Saudi Arabia. He was paid big money. He don't have to go back and box ever another day in his life. You roll the die. You take the risk. You put yourself in a position where you could face the very best, and it never goes wrong for you. You can't lose. You can't lose. A lot of people think about their stuff, their career, their profession. That's why boxers are so hesitant to face the very best. I think of Gervonta Tank Davis right now. Okay. I think of Canelo Alvarez right now. Now, Canelo Alvarez is rolling in money. So money's not an issue for him. Tank Davis is a multi-millionaire, right? Money's not an issue for him. So where's the upside when it comes to Tank Davis and Canelo in facing the best? What's the perception? Canelo is pound for pound this. He's seen as a great resume. He has a great, astounding career. So many wins. So Canelo, in order to maintain that image so that he could get those paychecks to be the guy that's in demand, you have to at least be at the top. So the fear of Canelo or the fear of Gervonta Tank Davis, and there are fears, why they don't go and face the very best is because these guys feel that their image, if it's tainted, that is to say, they're seen losing fights like how Canelo lost devastatingly to Bivol. If they keep on losing like that, their stock plummets and therefore their value plummets. And this is what they're concerned more about. Tank wants to look good. He doesn't care about who he's facing so much as looking good. And it's the same thing with Canelo. They're more obsessed with looking good. Now, here's the upside to them facing the very best, which they probably do not understand. And they misunderstand the Floyd Mayweather model. See, a lot of them think, and even Floyd Mayweather, when he's teaching his model now, he's sort of at fault with his model because the advice he's giving is not the things that he did in his career. What he did in his career and the advice he's giving to some fighters to sort of avoid other fighters is not good advice. I'm going to say this one time. I'm going to say it, and I think I truly believe it. Ryan Garcia is making the best decision of his life facing Devin Haney right now. Not because he's rolling the die and hoping that, 1 in 10 chance happens, but it's because Ryan Garcia is going to, if he sticks with Derrick James, that is going to become a much better boxer, even if he loses to Devin Haney, because Derrick James is going to be able to see what he needs to work on. And also he himself is going to be able to improve his game and get it up to a standard where maybe he faces Devin in the future, maybe he faces Tank in the future. Less likely to face Tank in the future because, one, Gervonta Tank Davis, at this point in time, I don't think he can make more than welterweight. Maybe he can fight at welterweight, but that's about it. He tops out there. So if Ryan moves up to welterweight, or Devin, Ryan and Devin will go somewhere up to middleweight. They may be middleweights when all is said and done. And those guys may face each other again. But what we do know is that when it comes to Tank, I don't think once they get past welterweight, it's not happening with Tank. And while I think Tank can fight welterweight, I also believe that Tank will not face those guys. I don't think he's going to face Devin Haney. Not at 140. No matter what he says, no matter how much he talks, I don't think that's happening. Just like how I don't think that Canelo is going to face David Benavidez. No matter what he says, no matter how much he talks, I don't think that's going to happen. And it's sad. And the reason being, these guys, they want to keep a certain image about them. They want to keep a certain dominance about them, a certain infallibility about them. It's just perception. Perception is everything. And that's where the big businesses will throw the big money at them. And they want the big businesses to throw more big money at them. The more they fight, the more they go in their careers. The more they want the big bucks. And what they seem to miss and they don't understand is you take the fights, win, lose, or draw. Once the fights are exciting, once the fights are entertaining, you're going to get paid. Oscar De La Hoya lost almost all the very big fights he ever had, but his value only went up. Why? Because he took them. Say what you want about Oscar. You can say he's a terrible human being, blah, 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 blah. His career is outstanding because he took the big fights. The Pacquiao, the Mayweathers, the Bernard Hopkins, the Felix Trinidads, the Pernell Whitakers, the Julio Cesar Chavez Jr.'s, the Hector Camacho fights. These are the biggest fights of his career. He took them. He didn't step away from them. He took them. And he only had like 45 fights, I think, or 40 fights or something like that. But the fights he had were the very best. You can't say that Oscar ducked the very best except for Winky Wright, and even so, the fight that he faced in place of Winky Wright, I think was a pretty good fight. I can't remember what it was, but I know also some decisions went his way, which some people would question how did he get the decision, but that's not the point. He faced the very best of all the renowned fighters out there. Oscar's one of those guys. Win, lose, or draw, he faced you. And that's something that got to count for something today. You know, now some of the fighters in fact, a good amount of the fighters I just mentioned, none of them became world champions. But they wouldn't be as well known by casuals and people in the business today had they not taken that risk. Had they not stepped out and decided, I want to make a name for myself. And they're much better off today than if they were to stay in obscurity. Let me give you a couple more. So Otto Wallen got a good paycheck for the Anthony Joshua fight. I can tell you that right now. And he made a name for himself by what he did with Tyson Fury. He didn't win the fight. Now here's a famous guy who would probably be in obscurity today were it not for his fight against a very competent, very skilled fighter on last minute notice. So last minute notice, the fight was going to be canceled. And then this guy came in and saved the fight. You guys know him today as Manny Pacquiao. Manny Pacquiao was discovered in the United States on a Showtime card. Or I think it was an HBO card. Because what's his name? He couldn't pronounce his name properly. Whatever his name is, I can't remember his name right now. But he's still talking about boxing. It's not Larry Merchant. It's the other guy. I forgot what his name is. Manny Pacquiao was a last-minute replacement for Alejo Ledwaba. Right? Jim Lampley, that's the guy. He could not pronounce Manny Pacquiao's name. He didn't know how to pronounce it. Okay? And Alejo Ledwaba was, I believe he was the IBF champion at featherweight, I believe. No, not featherweight. This is, I'm not sure what, I think it's a super bantamweight. I think it's a super bantamweight fight. And Manny Pacquiao made such a splash in that fight that he shocked everybody. He destroyed Alejo Ledwaba. And not only did he destroy Alejo Ledwaba, he had such an impact in that fight that his career pretty much changed. Of course, what solidified his career was when he beat Marco Antonio Barrera, and that was it. That was all she wrote. And he got fights like left, right, and center after that. But let me just show you. Okay, I need to find him as a boxer. There we are. I want to show you something. Guy rolled the die. He took the opportunity. Man eventually became a pay-per-view star and one of two fighters in all time in boxing to have the highest grossing revenue in one fight. Okay. And we know the who's who of who Manny Pacquiao faced after the Alejo Ledwaba fight. Manny Pacquiao was a world champion. He had beaten Chachai Sasuku. He was a flyweight champion. He had great fights in the Philippines, Nader Hassan, and so on. But he wasn't well known globally. But the Alejo Ledwaba fight broke him out into popularity. And because of that Alejo Ledwaba fight, and because he became world champion, he ended up fighting a unification fight with Agapito Sanchez, a very famous fighter who became world champion. And then he went on to face Marco Antonio Barrera. I believe it was how many fights later? 2 years later. 2 years later. And pretty much cemented him in history by beating the lineal champion Marco Antonio Barrera. And then he started one of the most legendary rivalries against Juan Manuel Marquez, and the rest is history, right? how this guy just did more and more incredible things. Right? But if Manny Pacquiao didn't take that fight against Leo Del Wawa, a world champion, super bantamweight, right? He came out of obscurity to face this world champion. If he didn't step up to the plate to face the very best, we wouldn't know who Manny Pacquiao is today. He would remain in obscurity, as many, many Asian fighters today. And the point I'm making is that boxers today, it is not a risk versus reward to face the very best in your division. Now, I see a number of young boxers, like, for instance, Floyd Schofield or Kid, also known as Kid Austin, calling out Shakur Stevenson. What they're supposed to do, the younger fighters, whether you're a star or you're not a star, you're supposed to be calling out the very best. And you should be following up on what you say, not just talking it, but you actually show us. If Floyd Schofield, we have a bunch of them, right? So when Frank Martin is going up against Gervonta Tank Davis, I can't fault Frank Martin for doing that. He worked his way up there anyway. But I can fault Gervonta Davis for his team saying one thing, oh, we're going to face Shakur Stevenson next, and he's not facing Shakur Stevenson. Instead, he's facing a lesser fighter in Frank Martin. To me, that's called a duck. And that's the problem. The upside, if Shakur were to face Tank, I know y'all will say, well, you should kick that ball down the road. How far down the road do you want to kick that ball? Shakur's already a world champion. Tank's already a world champion. How much further do you need to kick it down the road? Neither Shakur nor Tank are pursuing this. They have said nothing. Shakur said nothing. He's supposed to be next. He's going at Devin Haney, who's in another weight class, which is none of his business. Unless he's willing to go up to 140, why are you talking to Devin Haney? You have Tank right in your division. You have De Los Santos in your division. You have several other people set up to get other world titles, like Lomachenko, like with George Kambosos. You have William Zepeda, who is your mandatory. Why are you talking about a guy, two guys in another division when you have business at your own division? Why are you not interested in facing the very best in your division? Supposedly it's Tank. Supposedly it's Lomachenko. Supposedly it's George Kambosos. Why are you not interested in the people in your own division? And this is where Shakur is capping. We can see through his cap. Cap. Everything's a cap. You can't believe anything Shakur says, because he's full of shit. You're supposed to be the next guy Tank faces, according to his team. Why don't you want to face the best? Because you're a top rank? Thought you can make Balaram do what you say. No, he's running to Top Rank's agenda. He can chirp how much he wants. It's Top Rank that arranges what fight he fights next. It's his manager and his promoter. He's not his own boss. And they'll run it how they feel fit. So at the end of the day, Tank versus Shakur would be a great fight. And there's upside for Shakur and there's upside for Tank with that fight. Monetarily, worldwide. But let me tell you why that fight's not happening. That fight's not happening because Tank feels it's too risky for him and his image, and he feels his stock could fall if Shakur was to beat him. And for Shakur, it's a tough fight. If he gets knocked out, his stock plummets. This is how they look at it. But in fact, in reality, the truth is, if that fight happens, both of them will get their biggest paydays, and people will remember it for posterity, and it'll open up the doors for other fights to happen. And whether Shakur loses or Tank, nobody knows who will win or who will lose completely because nobody really knows. So you would have the Tank fans, you have the Shakur fans, sure. But at the end of the day, nobody really knows who would win that fight. This is two top level guys. Would I love to see it? Absolutely. Absolutely. And whether Shakur loses or not, it's only going to help him. Whether the Tank loses or not, it's only going to help him. Tank's value is not going to go that far down, especially if it's an exciting fight. Especially if there's a knockout. Or especially if the fight is just one in which Shakur has to take up his game to another level and he fights back and he edges it out or he wins it. It is in no way, shape, or form is that, and that's a challenge to both fighters. Both fighters have to step up their game and have that fight. And the time for that fight is now. It's not next year. It's not the year after. It's now. It's going to get stale if the fighters don't face each other now. And there are a lot of other big fighters, a lot of other big fights on the horizon and in the future for both fighters. Shakur says he doesn't like to lose. Well, who likes to lose? Nobody likes to lose. No one. But that's not the point. There's going to be a winner and there's going to be a loser. But at the end of the day, a fight like that is worth it. The risk versus the reward is right there. They're at that point now. They're at that point where, and they say, well, if we kick the can down the road, we make more money. Maybe. But you know what will happen? People will say that fight was so many years too late. That's what will happen. So I have to ask myself this question. I have to ask you guys this question. And if you guys have any other suggestions about any other fighters who stepped up and faced the very best, please put it out here. But I have this question to ask to the fans out there and to the people out there. Excuse me for a second. It's good. I'll go to the store and get some more. Definitely do this. All right. I have this question for the fans out there. I have this question for the people out there, professionals, etc. Which do you prefer? A trilogy of fights? Especially if the first fight's really good. Or do you prefer one fight, guys make a lump sum of money, and that's it? Mayweather versus Pacquiao could have been 2 fights, right? Even if Mayweather knocked out Pacquiao, they could have had a rematch clause and run it again, like Errol Spence could have done with Terence Crawford. And still, if Errol Spence continues to fight in boxing, he may build himself back up, and we may have one more clash between Errol Spence and Terence Crawford. It's possible that could happen at 154. It's possible. And Errol can still get his get back. They're going to be old, but the older they are, the better. My point anyway is this. Which you prefer? 2 fights in which the fighters make 2 times the set of money they would have made probably if they had 1 fight later on. Maybe, maybe not. Or you have 1 lump sum fight, like Mayweather Pacquiao. And then everybody say, oh, the fight was too late, blah, 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 blah. If Mayweather Pacquiao happened in 2010, and then they had a rematch, depending on how exciting the fight was, and they had a rematch maybe in 2012, 2013. That fight might have made much more money than that fight when they were much older. Because even in 2012, 2013, Mayweather was still in his prime. Right? My point being this. Sometimes trying to let something cook as with Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder, which is almost like a washed out thing now. It doesn't even seem like it could happen. And even if it does, it's not going to be the same. Sometimes letting fights marinate, it's not a good idea. Terrence Crawford's not getting any younger. He's not getting any younger. All right? He's 36 years old. He's going to have to get out of boxing very soon. When he's 38, 39, 40, he's got to get out of the sport. At tops, Terrence Crawford has 1 or 2 more fights left. And that's it for boxing. He has to find something else to do. So the question which remains is this. Terrence Crawford spent almost his entire career trying to pursue facing the best. But his opportunities were slim. Jerome Ennis is in the same boat, sort of. Not really, but kind of. Terrence Crawford, if he stays in boxing long enough, he's going to get beat by these up-and-coming young, strong, hungry lions. You know, I'm not going to tell you the prediction I want to make. I want to make one right now, but y'all will say it's ludicrous. So I'm not going to say it. I'm going to let it play out. But suffice it to say, guys like Devin Haney, guys like Alexander Usyk, guys like, I'm talking elite athletes now that are pretty famous. Usyk, Bivol, Haney, Benavidez, right? Who else we got? Who's been trying to face the best and not ducking or dodging nobody? Well, of course, Ennis. These guys, they will never go wrong. They'll never go wrong because they are doing what you're supposed to do, which is face the very best. That's where the money comes. Okay? And what people don't realize is, you know, people talk about Floyd this and Floyd that. Okay, let's just see. Let's look at Floyd's resume one more time. Okay? We're going to look at it one more time. Let's run through it. Let's look at it. So even when Floyd's trying to get people to duck other fighters and stuff like that, and I understand his logic. The Rolly Romero fight was actually a better fight, better suited fight for Ryan Garcia. Even his trainer, Derek James, said the same thing. If he had to go Ryan versus Devin Haney or Ryan versus Rolly Romero as world champions, he would have preferred the Rolly Romero fight. Everybody would have preferred that for Ryan because it's a fight he could win, you know, and build his confidence, and then he could take on the Devin Haney fight. But it is what it is. Kind of stepped in over his head. All right, let's look at it. Floyd Mayweather. Y'all say he duck and dodge people. Okay, let's just see. Let's just see. Floyd, 1 year into his pro career, faces Genaro Hernandez, the #1 super featherweight in the super featherweight division. Sounds like he's ducking anybody. Let's keep it moving. Then faces the #1 contender for his WBC title, Angel Manfredi. A few years later, he faces the #1 super featherweight in the division, even higher ranked than himself. Was the IBF champion after beating, stopping cold. What's his name? Hold on, I'll tell you. Robert Garcia, right? Robert Garcia, who's the trainer, of Marcus Maidana and all those other guys, right? He knocks out Diego Corrales. He goes on to face Jose Luis Castillo, the #1 lightweight at the lightweight division. Goes up in weight and he faces Arturo Gatti, the #2, not the #1. The #1 was, I believe it was Ricky Hatton after he beat Costa Tszyu. He went up to welterweight. He beat the former undisputed champion Zab Judah, who just lost to Carlos Baldomir. Went on to face Carlos Baldomir, who was the #1 welterweight in the welterweight division. Tell me where he's ducking anybody. Come on, let's go. Let's go. Jumps up to get the money fight against Oscar De La Hoya at 154, his debut. Beats Oscar De La Hoya by split decision. Oscar De La Hoya was the number 3 uh, super welterweight in the world at the time. The two highest, the other two top guys in the division at the time was Vernon Forrest and um, Spinks, Corey Spinks. Okay. He goes on to face Ricky Hatton, the number 1 super lightweight in the world, who had also won a WBA title at welterweight. And jumped back up to welterweight to face Floyd Mayweather. He goes on to retire from the sport, comes back, faces the number 1 lightweight in the world, pound for pound number 2 fighter in the world, Juan Manuel Marquez, the number 1 pound for pound being Manny Pacquiao, Marquez being his arch nemesis, as we all know. Having comprehensively beat Marquez, he was looking to face Manny Pacquiao in 2010. Did not get the opportunity, so he faced Shane Mosley, who was the number 1 welterweight in the world at the time after beating Antonio Margarito. He was the WBA champion as well. Tell me where he's ducking. Tell me where he's not facing the best. He goes on to face Miguel Cotto 2 years later. Miguel Cotto is the number 1 super welterweight in the world at the time. Please let me know when Floyd is ducking somebody, okay? He then goes on to face a year after Canelo Alvarez, who is the number 1 super welterweight in the world at the time, and much younger than him. He then faces Marcos Maidana twice, who is the WBA champion at the time. And then he goes on to face Manny Pacquiao, who is the number 2 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, and also the WBO champion, as well as the number 2 welterweight in the world behind himself. Pound for pound, one of the greatest fighters to ever live. Now, where in Floyd's resume do you see him not facing the best? So no matter what Floyd advice he gives these younger fighters, no matter what he tells you, Mr. Tank Davis, you face the best. Abdul Wahid, you face the very best. Don't listen to Floyd on facing Frank Martin. Why are you facing Frank Martin? Why are you facing a developmental guy, a guy who's not fully developed? Why are you facing Frank Martin? Why are you not facing Shakur Stevenson or Devin Haney or Vasily Lomachenko? Okay, Vasily Lomachenko is now facing George Kambosos. So we could, okay, fine. He's facing George Kambosos. When that's resolved, if he beats George Kambosos, why are you not facing him? Why are you not facing the number 1 fighters in your own goddamn division? You have Shakur, who's the number 1 WBC fighter. George Kambosos and Vasily Lomachenko are going to sort out who's going to be the number 1 IBF champion. We do not know who the WBO number 1 champion will be, but we look forward to it. Why are you not facing any of those guys? Because you're not doing like Floyd. You are not doing what his career did. You are not facing the number 1 fighter in the world. Floyd then fights Andre Berto. It was his farewell fight, which is a shit fight, but it is what it is. And then he goes on after he retires to come back into boxing to make a money-making fight in Conor McGregor. It actually was an actual fight on a resume, which was a waste of time. That's why some people say he's just 49-0, but he's 50-0. It's just what it is. But it was a money-making fight. And it was called the money fight. Literally called the money fight. Okay? Now, you look at Floyd's, you don't look at what Floyd's saying to you. You just look at what he did. It paid for him to face the very best. His life changed after he faced Oscar De La Hoya. He started making big money after that. And just because he was making big money and he could cash in big checks didn't mean he wasn't facing the very best. Because he understood by facing the very, very best time and time again, it only adds value to his stuff. Tank Davis is knocking out people. His gimmick is knockouts. Tank can deliver a knockout. Oh, if he touches you, he knocks you out. The truth be told, if y'all are really paying attention, It's not that Tank knocks you out with one shot. It is a byproduct of his body attack. Tank's a very good body attacker, underrated body attacker. And then he mixes it up and comes to the head and he counter punches you. Okay? He has power. He has good power. He's quick. He's fast. He's sharp. He reminds me of Deontay Wilder in terms of how he snaps his punches. But the mystique of him being this one-punch knockout artist is bullshit. Mike Tyson wasn't a one-punch knockout artist. Mike Tyson as well used to go to the body. Mix it up and then go to the head. Hit you with a punch you didn't see. The sweet science of boxing. People like to get caught up, especially people who don't know shit about boxing. They get caught up in gimmicks. I know boxing is entertainment. I know they're selling you something. I understand that. But you have to be able to understand the truth versus gimmicks. And if you guys think, oh, Tank, man, Tank beats everybody. He beats everybody. Oh, Tank. Man, Tank can box and Tank can beat everybody. If you're talking like that, then you're stupid. You're stupid. Because you're going for smoke and mirrors. A boxer understands boxing, knows what Tank is and what he isn't. And the reason Tank hasn't faced Shakur Stevenson, the reason Tank hasn't faced Devin Haney, the reason why Tank is afraid to face Vasily Lomachenko, he is afraid to face Vasily Lomachenko, is because these guys, they can move. They can vary distance and they can vary range. They understand range very well. Shakur, Devin, Loma, they understand range very, very well. They're not going to just stand in front of you and box you so that Tank can close the distance like he wants to. They're not going to necessarily walk you down so you can bait them in and pick your shots. So they can stand in front of you so you can pick your shots. Tank knows this. I saw him stepping around Ryan Garcia. I saw what he was doing. And Ryan was flat-footed, so he could match Tank in terms of pivoting with him. I saw what he was trying to do. He can't do that with Vasily Lomachenko. He can't do that with Shakur Stevenson. He can't do that with Devin Haney. And he knows it. And he knows it. He barely could do it with Pitbull Cruz. And Pitbull Cruz was coming to him, but coming to him off of different angles, dipping, changing levels, keeping his defense tight while he's coming through, taking the shots off his arms, deflecting and rolling, riding punches, dipping under punches, and coming up with his punches. Tank knows Pitbull is a problem. In fact, Tank said at the end of the fight against Pitbull Cruz, I don't want to see that guy again. Leonard Ellerbe echoed those sentiments by saying Pitbull versus Raleigh is not going to get Tank next. I want you to understand, if Tank doesn't want to face the best, his little gimmick might give him money, but will never give him the kind of money that he was supposed to get. If you're really about money. Canelo not only will lose respect in the sport of boxing, but he'll also lose the big paycheck he's looking for. Talking about $150 million and $200 million. Well, you're not going to get that, Canelo. And clearly, the sheiks and the princes in Saudi Arabia understand boxing enough to know they're not going to buy into your fake gimmick. They're not going to pay you to face a guy who you're afraid to face because it's going to affect your stock and it's going to affect your market value. They're going to pay you to fight a competitive fight that makes money because the fans want to see it. And that fight is not commensurate to the value that you are trying to tax them on, because they will make a loss if they pay you that kind of money for a fight that's not going to rake in over 1.5 million views, pay-per-view views. They know that. In fact, the pay-per-view money generated on a fight like that in the United States of America, they don't even know what it will be. So Canelo outpricing himself only looks bad on Canelo. Now also affects his stock, because how you are viewed by the public and also by the fans who drive the sport will result in how many people will actually buy your fight. How many people are interested to see your fight and buy it? How many people are really interested in seeing Canelo versus Munguia? Especially coming in the wake of the comments that Canelo made saying he's outpriced himself to face David Benavidez, who he's not facing. How many fans are so gullible that they will actually buy that fight? You get what I'm saying? That is why in the sport of boxing, it's about facing the very best. And your attitude in the sport of boxing is what will determine if you get more value and your stock actually goes up. That's why you have to be careful what you say and careful what you do. Especially if you say you're the face of boxing. Not but 2-3 months ago, I would have said Canelo is the face of boxing. He's one of the faces of boxing. Now I can't say that. Can't say it with a straight face. Because how he's acting since the Danny Jacobs fight. Now I hear some people, they go and they exaggerate it and they say, Canelo's always been this way. He's never wanted to face the very best. That's a lie. Straight up and down. No special effects. There are those out there who say, Canelo's been facing the very best and he continues to face the very best. That's a lie as well. Straight up and down. No special effects. The truth is, since the Danny Jacobs fight, Canelo has not been trying to face the very best. Yes, on paper, he's faced Callum Smith. On paper, Callum Smith is the very best. We saw Callum Smith just recently get knocked out cold by Artur Beterbiev. Right? Canelo was the first one to rough him up like that. Right? And people say, Callum Smith didn't have enough time. And no. He was a lineal champion, so he was the best in the weight class, no doubt about that. But he got beaten up bad. All right? And then after that, it was supposed to be David Benavidez. If he fought Callum Smith, should have been David Benavidez. But from the jump, once David Benavidez was WBC champion, Canelo was not interested in the 168-pound division. As soon as David Benavidez lost his belt, Canelo was up there fighting Callum Smith. And Yabdi Yildirim right after. And he never once faced David Benavidez. It should have been Callum Smith, Yildirim, David Benavidez. Then he could take on whoever you want. Instead, he tried to rush and grab all the belts. And he's been holding them hostage since then. No David Benavidez fight for a guy who deserved to have a fight with Canelo. And you know what his fans say? They said, well, David Benavidez, he lost his own belt. That was his fault. He didn't have the discipline, blah, 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 blah. But the truth be told, Canelo Alvarez still has to face David Benavidez. So at the end of the day, all this blah, 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 all this chirping really means nothing to anybody. And the value of Canelo and his stature is only falling. And no matter what Leonard Ellerbe says or how many of these people who promote ducking, Leonard Ellerbe has been promoting ducking with Tank for the longest while. And they're talking about Tank is the biggest name in boxing. And you're behaving like a coon, Leonard Ellerbe. You're behaving like a coon. You're behaving like somebody who encourages someone to snitch. You have no moral ethics. We know how to put on the biggest fights in boxing. No, you don't. If you did, Tank would have already faced Devin Haney and beat his ass. He'd already faced Shakur Stevenson and beat his ass. He'd already faced Teofimo Lopez and beat his ass. Those are all big fights. Big fights. Huge fights. Tank would have been a multi-millionaire already. Much bigger than he is now. But instead, Tank has been ducking, and he's getting these small fights, and he's trying to suck as much life out of them as he can and squeeze as much money out of them as he can. Because he's on this shenanigan called knockouts. Like Gennady Golovkin. Bum Lufkin. A guy who used to feed off of bums. Now, Gennady Golovkin made money. He made decent money in his career. But his legacy is crap. He's the guy that's been ducked. True. But he's also ducked a lot of fighters. Canelo has a better legacy than Gennady Golovkin. And you see, legacy is important for this reason, and this reason alone. Not only can you make money off of the legacy you have, but you can also make money in the future off the legacy that you have now. Sugar Ray Leonard made a lot of money off of his legacy and still makes money to this day off of his legacy of fighting 5 guys. 5 guys. Benitez, Duran, Hagler, Hearns, and Donnie Lalonde. That's where his legacy is. Off of 5 guys. Okay? Still milking it to this day. Okay? Man has no shortage of money. So legacy is important in that regard. Because the more people know about you, Floyd tries to stay relevant off the backs of the younger fighters. We know this. But the thing that will carry with him is his fights. People watch his fights and they marvel at him. That's what's going to cause them to pay to see him and to hear him and whatever he's involved in to invest in. It's his fights. So no matter what people say, this is a sport. The sport is called boxing. You think of any sport, the legends in that sport, they're able to continue advertising and doing royalties and doing business, commercial business with other people, and be used as a face for business, whatever the business enterprise is associated with, whatever sponsorship or whatever, because of their legacy in whatever sport they're in. Right? They get more paychecks because of that. Whether it's job commenting, like Andrew Ward comments on fights or whatever it is, you make money off of that post your sporting career. So legacy is kind of important in that regard. You can make money outside of the sport of boxing because of your legacy in the sport of boxing. Of course, you can stay with boxing as well and train people and so on. But I'm just saying. So if you are so short-sighted that you can't understand facing the best is what really determines everything. Now, I know there are a lot of sideshows out here. Jake Paul's, talking about facing Mike Tyson and blah, 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 blah. I need to go. But you have to understand that is a sideshow thing. And yes, Jake Paul is making probably more money than some of the boxers in boxing right now. A lot more money. But that's sideshow stuff still. And he's sort of cheating the system in a way. But in a way, he has to pay for cheating the system. You understand? Because there's nothing's in a void. Something has to be filled back that has been taken away. And he'll have to pay for it, ultimately, in the end. But those are sideshow things. Real boxing, professional boxing, you have to earn your stripes. And especially if you've been doing it since youth or childhood, you have to earn your keep and earn that big bucks. It's not going to be given to you. You have to take it. And when you get the opportunity, like Fonfora is getting this opportunity, you should take it and go as hard as he can. Because these opportunities don't come every single day. So let me leave you with a couple other fighters out here who seize their opportunities. And I'm going to talk, I talked about prominent ones. I've even talked about Oscar De La Hoya. You know, even the most promising athletes, you have to take the opportunity. You know, Pernell Whitaker always wanted to face Julio Cesar Chavez. When he finally did at welterweight, he was robbed. They call it a draw. But his legacy only got better because he fought Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. When he lost to Oscar De La Hoya, his legacy only got greater because people began to realize, oh, the judges are on the side of this particular fighter. But the people always felt Pernell Whitaker, and to this day, people always felt Pernell Whitaker beat Oscar De La Hoya. Right? Now, Pernell Whitaker didn't make the kind of money, and he blew some of his money on drugs and stuff. But ultimately, in the end, Pernell Whitaker lived a very comfortable life and career for a superstar, you know. And so all I'm saying is it never goes wrong by you rolling the die and taking a chance at the very best. So what you need decided to do this. Nobody came on here. I think I probably came at a strange time for some people. But this is what I got for you guys. I'm what you need. I'm going to get you guys later. I have to bounce, go do some business, and come back. I had to rest most of the day because I was very, very tired. And so I shut it down. But today I did some streaming with you guys. Don't forget you can donate to this channel. You can donate via PayPal. It will be in the description. And also you can join as a guest on this program. Don't forget you can join as a guest. I ran through this. I would love to be communicating with somebody else and having a little dialogue with a fellow fan. But that didn't happen tonight. Hopefully it will happen another time. I'll catch you guys later. I am what you need. Peace.